What is the biggest threat to the stability of college football? Is it NIL? Oh, I dare you, Braden. Is it playoff expansion? Is it conference realignment? So I'm going to go a couple of directions here. I'm not going to bore you with the same take I've got on the playoff, because I know a lot of you think otherwise, and you just probably hit the fast forward button at this point when I talk about playoff. I know my audience. I'm sharp enough to see those metrics. Is this the football business? Is that what we're in? If you coach, if you're the head coach at Tennessee, if you're Josh Heupel, are you in the football coaching business? Because I would argue you're not. Am I sitting behind this microphone? Am I in the football talking business? I would argue I'm not. Josh Heupel and I, in this case, are in the same business. We are in the entertainment business. And that doesn't need to get lost. I don't have it lost on me, because I live in the entertainment world, but sometimes I think football coaches have it lost on them because they think of themselves as coaches first and foremost. But here's the thing. We got lacrosse coaches out there, and they don't make any more than anyone watching this show does. We got baseball coaches out there. Some of them can't even be retained as full-time employees. Well, they're coaching, just like you're coaching. Why in the world are you making 1,000 times what they make? It's because you're in the entertainment business as well, and that industry has dictated that those sports over there are some quirky little indie movies. They may be good plot lines, maybe superb acting, but you are the Marvel franchise. And for whatever reason, people have decided that they really, really love your stuff. They love what you're associated with. That's why I don't talk baseball on the show. I love baseball, but there is, candidly, very little money in talking about college baseball. There is, conversely, massive scalability and profitability in talking about college football. So I say that to tee up what I'm about to tell you is the biggest threat to the sport. We're in the entertainment industry. College football is an entertainment product, no different than a movie. But that's the good news and the bad news. You see, the good news is this is the greatest sport on earth. I firmly believe that. We have a unique combination of things in our sport, in our form of entertainment here, that do not exist anywhere else. A movie can make you cry. Another movie can get your adrenaline going. I will never forget what it was like the first time I saw Gone in 60 Seconds, which is, I will contend, one of the great films of the 2000s. And I remember that it made me feel a certain way. I remember Old Yeller made me feel a certain way that I never want to feel again. That's why I've never watched it again. But there is nothing quite like college football that can make you feel about 10 of those things over the span of 3 hours. And it is a very entertaining product. That's the good news. The bad news is also everything I just said, because it turns out the good news is also the bad news, because we couldn't hide it forever. We couldn't hide it forever. Eventually, people realized how profitable it is if marketed the right way. Dirty words we didn't really want associated with the game all that much. If it was marketed, if it was harnessed, and if it was reconfigured, dare I say, in a lot of ways, if it were professionalized and streamlined like the more sophisticated Sunday crowd, well, they got their hands on it. Some of you support it, and that's your prerogative. I don't necessarily ride with you on that, but that was the risk. Okay, in my opinion. Now, I'm the one with the microphone. They asked me, so you can all have your opinions on this. But it was my opinion that, and it is still my opinion, that there's this saturation point. It's a really inexact science here. But it's just like your favorite restaurant. When it first opens and you and a few hundred people know about it, and it has that authenticity. But at the same time, if the chef tells you, boy, we need to get some business in here, you go and you tell a few friends, don't you? Because you gotta keep Pete open. You gotta keep those street tacos coming. These things are great. So we need to get enough foot traffic in the door to sustain. But what do we not want? We don't want a line 2 blocks wrapped around this place because, number one, I can't get in anymore, and then he's gonna franchise it, and then it's gonna lose its charm. It's gonna lose what I loved about it. Pete, don't do it. And then Pete looks back at you and says, ESPN says I have to. Fox says I have to. CBS says I have to. And you go, Pete, I hate it, but I'd probably do the same thing. And therein lies the great threat. What's the saturation point? In other words, what was the point at which this sport needed to stop making moves to grow before it sacrificed a critical mass of its integrity and appeal. To me, now you know my thoughts on this, it is happening right now with conference realignment. I mean, I don't exactly see a lot of charm in UCLA playing Rutgers in a conference game. Okay, there's not a lot of charm in that for me, but I get why it happened. And there's not a lot of charm for me in seeing games like Georgia-Tennessee start to shape up, or seeing Ohio State and Michigan coming at us, and knowing all the while in the back of my mind, those games are merely going to be for seeding. Doesn't matter who wins or loses. All we'll find out is who's going to be seeded higher in the playoff. That is not the charm that I've come to love about the urgency and the zero safety net approach of the college football regular season. But that's where we're headed, okay? So here's what could happen, because ultimately, like I said, we're in the entertainment business, right? So as long as the people are coming to the product, it's not threatened, it's not endangered. Sure, it may lose some things that I loved about it. Maybe it loses some things that you loved about it. But as long as people are coming, as long as you've got a return on the immense investment that's being made in this sport, you can't call it a failure. At least financially, you can't. I think the other biggest threat is, what if we get to a point where the powers that be realize the juice was not worth the squeeze? Translation: what if people like me end up being a little more right than we are wrong? Because there are tons of people out there that just think I'm dead wrong about this, and I'll see eventually, when we expand the playoff, people like me will find out that no, it doesn't detract from the regular season. It just adds value to it. Of course, my contention is you cannot increase the amount of anything and maintain the value of it. It's the rule of scarcity. And I don't think that that is something that's being reinvented when it comes to college football. I just think instead of having those do or die games, those no safety net games, you don't have those anymore. You are going to add some consequence on games. Yeah, there are going to be some games that end up meaning a little bit more as it relates to the playoff that never would have before. I just think instead of having some spike 9 or 10 games on the 1 to 10 urgency scale, we're going to give those up entirely in the regular season, and we'll have a few more 6s and 7s, featuring teams that do not stand much of a chance of winning a title anyway. Your mind will be reconditioned to understand that in due time. And so here's the big threat. Your sport becomes a tournament sport. College football becoming a tournament sport is the biggest threat to college football. College football, when you think of the NFL, you probably think of postseason Super Bowl, like that. Those are the images that pop in your mind. When you think of college basketball, you think of the NCAA tournament, March Madness. When you think of college football, you think of Saturdays in the fall. And the fundamental threat to this sport is if in 20 years that's not what you think anymore. You think about Glendale, Arizona, or Arlington, Texas, or Miami, Florida, and you think of soulless NFL venues, and you think of semifinal playoff games and national championship games, and that's where the sport begins for you. Because that's not college football. That's not a remote piece of the charm of it. That's not the romanticism of it. And so, again, I know sometimes it makes me sound 90 years old hanging on to something, but there are some things worth hanging on to, Because once they leave, you don't get them back. Seen it happen with many a sport. There's a reason I don't watch pro wrestling anymore. There's a reason I don't watch NASCAR anymore. This happened to those things. I gave them a chance. I loved them at one point. I don't anymore. I checked out. I didn't leave them. They left me. So that's my spiel on that. I'll say that at least a dozen more times before 2025. Guys, thanks for watching Late Kick. Make sure and leave a comment. I love interacting with you. But most of all, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. That's how we keep all of this free.